All right, so we
Should I hook us up in the kitchen?
Yeah.
William, how many do you want? Oh, yeah, Bill.
Yeah, we're on live. It's Friday night. It's episode 3.5. That's 3.5 is Friday night episode. 0.5 episodes are all Friday nights. Tonight, my perception is my reality. We talk a lot about perception and reality, so I'm going to talk about it more tonight because you just can't talk about that enough in my book. We have Crystal in the house. You guys can see that.
It appears, yeah.
And let's see what I was going to say. Before I get going, because I'm going to start on a 10-minute, 20-minute rant, probably. Shane, what are your thoughts on today? What do you have, or what? What's something that you're just dying to say right now, so that you can get it out, so I can go ahead and start talking? Put you on the spot.
Lord help me. that would start. Or Calgon, take me away. Today's been an interesting day. It's been challenging in some ways, but it's been a good one. I do want to mention, you notice that I have a very cool T-shirt going on, and it was from one of our listeners, Lovely, who had decided to send a T-shirt and a unbelievable bag. All right, here we go. I'm getting used to this now. Lovely is from Indonesia, Jakarta, I believe. And she's a fan of the show, as well as Serenely Speaking. I should say she's more of a fan of Serenely Speaking, and the show kind of went with it. I don't want to, miss the priority there. No. Anyways, so I definitely said that I would be honored to go ahead and wear the T-shirt. So that's part of the fun. Other than that, with the partnership with JGF organization, with Serenely Speaking, we're busy right off the bat. Got a lot of work to do for the beginning of next week, and really looking forward to the show that we have planned for Thursday with Arisen Strength, when we're going to be talking about bullying. I think we've got some really good content. It's something that I'm definitely impassioned about. So I think that we're going to have a lot of good energy and a really good show.
Right, and you mentioned JGF, and one of the things I did notice, one of the radio shows is QU and ARC, and they talk a lot about sustainability on that. Something I would maybe suggest people look into, QU and ARC on Blog Talk Radio.
Blog Talk Radio, right.
You can look that up. It's definitely a part of the JGF Foundation there.
The station, by the way, is 81.3, and it's WIRN.
81.3 WIRN, by that on Blog Talk. Sustainability, that's something I talk about too, local and sustainable. Yesterday I mentioned a buddy of mine has a restaurant down in Florida, Crest Restaurant. Here's their menu for tonight. I just thought I'd throw this up there because it makes me think of talk about local and sustainable. They're using local and local products. Sustainable farming is real key, so they make sure they deal with farms that practice that as much as they can. I mean, he at the end of the day, he is running a restaurant, so if he has to get some product, he's got to get some product. But he really goes out of his way to make sure he's getting the best available local and sustainable products. And if he has to bring stuff in, then he'll bring stuff in. But he tries to deal with companies that are kind of local, that he's kind of just contacting from afar and having it shipped in. And he's a food advocate, and that was his article yesterday. Was talking about how food advocacy, you really can't be isolated. You got to get out there. So I just thought I'd throw this menu up here just for something to look at tonight while I was just mumbling about sustainability. And so what is perception is reality. One of the ways we shape our perceptions, our reality, our view of the world is through news. And I'm picking on Fox News just because I think they're fun to pick on. And this is actually a story from a year and a half ago. But it just popped up again on my timeline, and there was probably something current that they're doing, and it reminded them of something later ago. But this was a story about Fox News being caught editing press conference video, president's press conference, to sort of create a narrative of what they thought was happening. This is something you see in movies, something you see on TV shows, where video gets cleverly edited to make it look like something's happening that's not happening. And it's especially dangerous when it happens on the news, because we watch the news and that news, the way we watch it, shapes our perception. You'll notice sometimes there'll be like a whole bunch of shark attack stuff in the news. There'll be a shark attack, and all of a sudden for the next 2 months, it's making the news. There's tons of shark attacks, and that's all they report. You haven't heard any shark attack news, in a year or two. It's still the same numbers it was when we reported all the time for those 2 months. Train wrecks is another one. If there's a train wreck, all of a sudden every night on the news it seems like there's a train wreck until they get tired of doing it. And then you start thinking, oh my God, the trains are just doing whatever the trains are doing. That's just what they do. Fires, airplane disasters. We normally hear about those when they happen, but when they start getting like, oh, airplane maintenance is out of control, it's the same as it always is. So don't use the news as kind of a barometer that things are going wrong at that moment. Things are always, for the most part, what they are, and the news just takes a little snapshot, and they're giving you a snapshot. So if you're getting excited, interested, motivated by the news, keep in mind that that's been happening for a while, and it will continue to happen for a while, and not that we're going to hell in a handbasket all of a sudden. We're on a slow boat to China, as they say. We're getting there, but that's perception shaping reality. We watch news, it shapes our perception, and whatever the news chooses to cover, that's what we start thinking is important, and that's what your perception is. Your perception is really this thing that sort of picks out what's important, and just be careful when you're. That's the thing. Just be careful about perception, because it does shape your reality, and it's your view of the world.
Well,
just
real quickly on that.
I think part of the reason why that happens is because it's the hot topic, and so the different media outlets, and especially Fox, jumps on that and definitely saturates that whole idea of what that particular subject is going to be from all sides, and I think that they definitely go out of their way to do that, and sometimes it's definitely overblown, and especially lately with a lot of different footage that's been around in the different subjects that have been going around not only in this country but also others.
They were talking, and you guys missed it. The microphones were even off. So how about that? Nothing is going right here tonight. It's a perception is reality. So what is the reality? That we have no idea what we're doing. And that's probably the perception and the reality, and that's probably accurate for me. I have no idea what I'm doing here. And again, you're still looking at Shane, and I'm still talking, and oh man, I get to reset and start over.
Easy. You can do that. It's your show.
But the point, the point is, it's the hot topic of the time, and media does go with that because it's whatever they're trying to get eyes on the screen. I understand that they're trying to make money. I'm just saying, for when you're watching the news, don't let changes in the news affect your shift your perspective too much, because changes in the news are a marketing plan and not a reflection of reality. If they're suddenly covering a certain story, ISIS for a couple of weeks went on and on about all the dangers of ISIS, and everybody was talking about ISIS, and then don't let that change your perspective, because it's they're just talking about it because they're just trying to make a profit. It's okay they're talking about it. It's okay to read up on it and find out about ISIS and be aware of it, but don't let it change your perspective too much about the world. Because ISIS has been around for a while, it's going to be around for a while, and the next thing. So whatever the hot topic of the day is, that's just the hot topic of the day, and they're only covering it because they're trying to make some profit. There, my little rant on that, and I picked Fox News only because I was picking on them, but all the news media, they're all trying to make profit, so they're all showing. And maybe Fox goes a little bit out of their way by editing press conference video to create a narrative, but maybe they all do that too. So, but the point is, just be careful. The Milgram study. This is another one I want to talk about, because this is perception is reality. This is a psychological experiment. It was done in the 60s. There was like 2 of them that were done back there that were really famous. And well, see, I should have looked up the other ones. See, I should be more prepared when I do the show. But there was one where they put got a bunch of kids to make them think that they were not to make them think, but to act like prison guards and prisoners. Is the prison guard prisoner experiment that was done in UCLA or Berkeley or someplace over in California, one of these hippie schools. They put the kids in. It was supposed to run for 2 weeks, the experiment, and they divided the kids up sort of randomly when they got there. They said, okay, randomly divided them up. You have for the guards, you have for the prisoners. And then there's the prisoners ones were supposed to stay in their little cages for 2 weeks, and the guards were going to take care of them, feed them, whatever, but had to move them from cells to the bathrooms, and basically act like prison guards. And the idea was to see what happens to people when they're sort of thrust into these situations where there's this power differential, where you definitely have people who are in charge and people who have to follow orders. And they actually had to stop the experiment early because it was just getting out of hand. The guards had just were drunk on power. The student they were afraid the students who were in the prison were going to get like a irreparable depression stuff. I mean, they knew it was an experiment, of course, and they had signed up, psychology students, but it went much worse than they thought it would. But make kind of think about the criminal justice system and how we treat prisoners, and when we see these stories about the cops. That's another hot topic of the day. Police brutality, and police are out of control. Militarization of the police. There's the privatization of criminal justice, private prisons. All that stuff is not surprising, given that the earlier it's the Stanford prison experiment. That's what it's called. So you can Google that up, Stanford prison experiment, and and that was a good one. But another one about that same time was this Milgram study, and so this was a Yale University study, and they had people in lab coats, scientists, and they got people to be their assistants, and they would just pull people off the streets. They would give them psychological evaluations, and they said, "Oh, you're going to be our assistant for this study." And what you do is you'll watch through the glass, and we're going to be interviewing some other people, and they're going to be hooked up to electrodes. And I don't know, when they get, it's almost like that scene from the Ghostbusters where they're doing the psychic study. They're using aversion therapy to enhance psychic ability when they what card am I looking at, and they get it wrong and they shock them. But so there's a variation of that, maybe a little bit more scientific, but or maybe less scientific for some people. But the idea is that they had these assistants those are the people who are really being experimented on, who are helping the scientists, and their jobs were to push the buttons to administer the shocks. And there was a dial that could get turned up, and it might have been something along the lines that every time you shock the person, you also turn it up a notch, so that the next shock will be even more than the previous shock. And it was even kind of, I don't know whether it's explicitly stated or if it was well understood or just really hinted at, but at the highest levels it was considered lethal. So the people knew that they could turn the dials up to actually potentially be lethal. And in fact, probably at almost any level, electric shocks can be lethal. I mean, you should be running electric charges through people's bodies without knowing what you're doing, but that's a whole other kettle of fish. But in this experiment, the people kind of went along with it. They weren't really happy about going along with it in a lot of cases, and they had to be told maybe a couple of times. And this was part of the experiment. It was like, how much would people go along with it? How much what sort of negative behavior can you get them to engage in just by sort of ordering them to do it? Turn up, shock them, turn it up a notch. And they were trying to see what that, and it was kind of, I guess, coming off World War II. This was 1961, and World War II had just been 15 years earlier. So if you imagine, it'd be like us doing an experiment based on something like 2001 after the towers going down. So this was pretty soon after, in that sense. Only 15 years, 16 years. It was pretty close to what we're talking about from our distance from 9/11, which is kind of a scary thought. But they, so we're just getting old. That's the scary part. That's what I mean by scary thought. But they wanted to see they wanted to get some insight into, how could the Nazis, the people who are good people, maybe not all the Nazis, but a lot of good people did a lot of bad things during that war, and what was going on there, and are humans really bad? And that's his headline: is did the infamous Milgram study paint humanity darker than we are? Because part of the study kind of came out and said, yeah, people are pretty bad. If you tell them to shock somebody, they'll do it. And then this person's kind of countering it, and I tell you the truth, I didn't carefully read what they say, only because I had an opinion on this study for a long time. So when I saw this headline, I thought, Of course, the study, it's almost like the rat cage that I talked about yesterday. They did the cocaine study with the rats, and they said, oh, this shows this. And then somebody pointed out, but, you got the rats in the cages isolated. How do you know that you can just test that? There's confounding factors. In any scientific study, there's confounding factors. And if you don't account for the confounding factors, you're going to create a false perception, and it's going to give you sort of a false sense of reality. Science is that part that I talk about this. That's the part that kind of listens for the truth. And the whole idea behind science is to clean that perception up as much as possible, to remove it if possible, and to have a direct connection to the universe. The universe is always talking, it's always telling the truth, and science is trying to be that direct connection to the universe that says, what is actually happening here? What is the truth of the situation? I don't want it filtered through people's perspective and biases, and when you do that, you have to be careful, and that's what makes science hard. And with the rat experiment, they said, oh no, it makes the rats will use the cocaine until they die. And then somebody kind of went up and they showed that that's maybe not necessarily true, because we'll put them in a different type of cage and say in a different type of cage it doesn't happen. So maybe it's about what kind of cage you're in. That was yesterday. So this one here, what was really happening is these were not people working for the Nazis trying to support a government so that a government could exert its will over citizens. Which I think they were kind of drawing that conclusion, is that people will, follow instructions to, that will result in bodily harm, and nobody actually turned it up to the fatal level. Actually, they all had stopped by the fatal level, but there were people turning it up pretty high, and most of the people turned it up a little bit. I think maybe all of them turned it up a little bit, and a lot of them got up to the very high levels, but nobody pushed it to the fatal levels. But the thing is these were not people following instructions that were inflicting pain sort of like on arbitrary people for the good of the state. Okay? These were people who were told they were participating in a scientific experiment, and in order to gather this scientific data, they really needed to turn these knobs up, because they were trying to get this, had to do with so just with that mindset, I could imagine me there being very uncomfortable and turning it up, because I'm going to trust the scientists know how to do science, and they know that, okay, that this has probably been approved by a board, and then it's ethics, whatever there's just careful vetting of these things, and that this is important scientific data that needs to be gotten, and the only way to get this scientific data right now is to turn this up. And I'm not a scientist. I'm not qualified to make that judgment. Maybe I shouldn't be turning it up, but I could see myself getting sort of talked into doing it, and not because I'm following strict orders from a superior, but because I think I'm operating in the service of science. I feel like, wow, I'm really contributing to science here. So there's that sense of, you're capitalizing people's sense of awe and wonder and their love of science, and their that this is actually at the end of the day, this is going to be a good thing, because science has been guilty of a lot of things in the past and done a lot of horrible things that in retrospect we probably never should have done. Maybe I should talk about that. But you know what? At the end of the day, we keep that scientific data. It's horrible as some of the scientific experiments have been in the past, and people will even say today, no, we would never do that. We would never do that. We would never do that. So, yeah, but you kept that data and you used that data that came from it, right? Oh yeah, of course. But you have the data. You got to use it, right? One of you start with the most horrible example that I can think of. There's a couple horrible examples. This is maybe not the most horrible, because that would be unfair to other people. But one really horrible example was the Japanese during World War II. Unit 731. Have you ever heard of this Unit 731, Shane? Yeah, it's very quiet. They don't talk about it much. People hear about World War II with the Nazis and Dr. Joseph Mengele and his twin experiments and all the craziness he was doing. Well, in Unit 731, I'm not going to remember the guy's name. It's if I saw it, I would remember his name, Ishihara Yamamoto, or I don't know. I just made up those words. That is not his name. I just made up a Japanese-sounding word. But he was the head of this Unit 731. You can just type Unit 731, go to Wikipedia, and then be horrified at what you read. The most horrible things you can imagine. Experiments that should never be done on anybody. But they were trying to develop some scientific. And after the war, horrible war crimes, these people all should have been executed. In fact, we executed a lot of people after World War II for war crimes. The Nuremberg trials, you saw the people over there. On the Japanese side, especially all these people associated with Unit 731, every single one of them got a pardon in exchange for the scientific data. that they had collected. I mean, they did study that one of the things they were trying to learn about was hypothermia. How does the human body react to freezing? How would you go about doing this? Well, we'll start with some people. We'll soak their arms. Well, we'll soak an arm. First of all, you don't want to soak their whole body. We'll soak their arm, and then we'll freeze it solid, basically, and then we'll thaw it, and then we'll remove the arm, and because you're going to lose the arm anyway, and then the person's got 3 more limbs, so we got a while to go before we're done with this person. And they would go through the people like doing this kind of stuff and collect all kinds of data on the effects of hypothermia on the human body. Well, we learned a lot about, there's a lot of valuable data there. The Japanese were meticulous. They were exacting. This was some classic science going on here, but it was, it's the forbidden experiment kind of stuff. Then they did other medical things, But we have a history of doing these medical ones. In the U.S., I picked up the Japanese there, and I mentioned the Germans. With the U.S., let's throw us under the bus. Might as well. The Tuskegee syphilis experiments. So there's a Tuskegee Airmen. People remember them. There was a famous Corps black airmen during World War II, and the Flying Aces, great job, the Tuskegee Airmen. But also in the town of Tuskegee, which was a major black population in Tuskegee, Alabama, maybe somewhere in the South, they did this syphilis experiment that went on for 30 years, 40 years, to see how syphilis progressed in the human body. So they went into the area, and they were told people, we're going to be trying these experimental syphilis trials to try and figure out how to treat syphilis. And what the people didn't realize, they were doing the part of the experiment where they don't do anything. So for like 30 or 40 years, these people were not getting any treatment at all. It was they were just being studied to see how the disease was affecting them, and they thought that they were, getting a trial. Now we actually, you could get involved in studies like that, and they do these double-blind studies where you might be in the control, and you're told kind of upright that we're going to do this, and some people are not going to be getting any medicine, and some people are, but it's double-blind, meaning you don't know where you are, in which category you're in, and the doctor doing it doesn't know. There's a third party that sits somewhere else that had controlled everything beforehand, and they didn't see any names or anything. They kind of like, they're sent a list of numbers. Numbers are randomly assigned. They come back, and then numbers are matched with names. So the whole thing is, basically it's very difficult to figure out who's in what experiment. But the people who are doing it have no idea. It's double blind. It's blind on both sides. Well, Tuskegee wasn't like that at all. It was, the people were blatantly lied to. They were told they were going to receive treatment, and they were receiving no treatment. They were just being examined. So we do this kind of stuff, and so that's talking about horrible crimes, war crimes, maybe. How did I get there? I don't know. From Milgram. But the thing about Milgram is that's a study that a lot of people are familiar with, and they think that it points this, kind of shows how horrible humans are, and that we will do things, we'll just blindly follow orders, with little or no preparation or provocation or anything. But I thought, well, this is a weird example, because these people were told they were acting in the interest of science, and I think people do things differently when it comes to science. They take more chances. They're more willing to risk because they really do think there's a greater good for everybody by doing science. When you're doing it kind of like make your government happy, that's not necessarily good for everybody. When you're doing stuff in the name of science, you're actually benefiting all of humankind, in theory, because science applies to everybody. We don't have, science is not like religion or politics where we all have our own. Science is science. So, but that was the Milgram thing, and got me thinking about and then while I was talking about it, made me think of some of this other war crimes and horrible experiments gone wrong. But I guess another thing, experiments are hard to do, especially when you're dealing with people. Experiments on people are very difficult because of confounding factors and the limitations. They're not like rats where you can, they used to be apparently, but not anymore. You can't kill people anymore. Scientists are all upset across the world. We can no longer kill people. Are you kidding me? How are we going to learn anything? Very slowly, very slowly. So, a reaction to any of that shock?
Well, it's definitely shocking to hear about, learn about. I've always been one to think that people can definitely be manipulated and definitely be led to do things that they otherwise wouldn't do, or even that they know not to do, because they think that it's right. I mean, look at the situation when you go into a gang. I mean, you have a number of different things that you have to do in order to be in the gang. And the first thing is that you're beaten into the gang, and some actually accept that. They accept the fact that they're going to get a beating from about anywhere between 5 to 12 to however many people, just to get in. Just a bit, but at the same time, it's like I can definitely see. Now you mentioned outside factors. When you're doing that same type of experiment, if somebody's daughter or their son is sitting in that chair, you would hope that that's going to be an outside factor, whether or not they're going to turn up the dial a little bit. But then again, if the doctor says, look, your daughter or your son is going to be better because of this, yeah, because of the naiveness of the way that a lot of people are, and they're not fully equipped, they rely on, like you said, the experts. I mean, in the older generations, when it came to a doctor, whatever the doctor said, that's what they did, period. Because they didn't have any time in order to worry about whether or not that the doctor was right or not. And in fact, they had a different kind of social status as to where the doctor was significantly higher in knowledge and capability than what they were at that time. Now we question things a little bit more than what that was. But, I mean, it's definitely one of those things as to where if we don't have that knowledge base, there's nothing to grab hold of to say, hey, this isn't right, and there's no way. But as you talked about in with the article, even when they know it's not right, I mean, there's no way that the people that were involved as Nazis didn't know that what they were doing was not right, whether or not that it was a war or not. You know what I mean? There was definitely extenuating things that they did to different groups and subgroups that was beyond anything that would have been even reasonable for war. So that is a shocking reality of the situation.
Yeah, well, I guess that comes down to this: that perception is reality. You just monkey with another person's perception enough. And one of the things that you can do with perception is you can minimize certain things that should be red flags. Broadcast, say, oh my God, you realize you can minimize that by brightening up something else on somebody, and then you get fooled, and then yes, they might have known what they were doing on some level was wrong, but what ends up happening is they convince themselves, well, it's not as wrong as this other thing, by me. Right. So so it gets really complicated and weird, and we get these ideas in our head, and then it really kind of affects the way we view the world.
And when you bring emotion into it, that's a totally different thing too.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the people who have gone through with 9/11.
I mean, when you put emotions into play, think about 9/11. I mean, for the first part of 9/11, we all prejudice went away, right? All the the racial issues and everything like that. At least it wasn't publicized, right? And we all came together more so as Americans at that time, and really humans, But and when it came to our government going ahead and retaliating and going after those who were responsible for 9/11, the emotions definitely got into play as to where it's like, go get them, go get them. I don't care if you put their head on a stake. I don't care, because the emotion that got involved, as opposed to if they didn't have that emotion, well, maybe this isn't necessarily the right thing to do, but you're in charge.
Yeah, that was actually pretty amazing. So I remember those first day or two afterwards. We are all American. It was just like last week was the Je suis Charlie with the Mohammed cartoons and the French thing, and everybody was, Je suis Charlie, Je suis, I'm Charlie, I'm Charlie, I'm Charlie. And after 9/11, it was I am American. And I remember actually seeing the headlines from around the world, and from Japan and from France and from Germany and from the Middle East, everywhere, and they all said, I'm American, I'm American, because the whole world came together, at least on those initial days. And I remember crying seeing those headlines because of that, because there was this profound connection, and it wasn't because they were saying they were American, like, oh, I'm so happy that they feel like they're American. It was because of that connection that what they're really saying is we're all connected, we're all the same, and and it was an opportunity, really. I mean, what's his name? Is that his name? Bush. Yeah, his approval rating went through the roof at that point. It was like 93%. It was unbelievable, and there was a golden opportunity to capitalize on that human connection we had all made. And instead, he decided to turn it to an effort to start a war with Iraq, who had nothing to do with 9/11 anyway,
and deplete the resources for our country,
yeah,
which made the subgroupings even more divided,
right?
And
went to this whole war, and he never raised taxes, never funded the war, so that just ended up causing problems. Don't get me started on all that, But the main thing was that if for those of you who are old enough to remember this, that couple days right after 9/11 was just the most amazing thing. But I still remember I was at the Jell-O Museum in Leroy, New York. Jell-O, very famous product, came from originally over here in New York, near Rochester, over in Western New York. In a little museum there, the Jell-O Museum in Leroy. It may not be there anymore. But we were there at the museum that day when we launched the missiles into Iraq, and I remember thinking, here we go. It was the most heartbreaking, devastating thing, because we had officially lost all goodwill. We were doing something we should not have been doing. There were people cheering it because, America, America, and they start doing that America stuff. And I don't like that whole thing when people just like cheer for America for the sake of cheering for America, without reflecting on what does the America stand for. This is something I've talked about with the language handshake, is that we have words have meanings, but the words are basically labels, they're tags, they're hooks into bigger thoughts that we have in our heads. You can have a thought of what America is in your head, but the flag becomes now a label or a tag for that. The red, white, and blue is a symbol. It's just symbolic. It is not America. America is not the flag. The flag is just this thing that we kind of agree on to say that's what we're going to use to communicate this much more complex thing, the greatness of America. And it's kind of what this story's about here. This next story. This is the Sikh Captain America fights racial stereotypes. And again, come to our website, our Facebook page. It's Random Thoughts with Random Access Facebook page, and you can see these stories. You come across these each day. Throw a couple of them up there. They get tweeted out on our Twitter account at Random Access, and you can see them there. You can also on Twitter, you can search for our tag, RTWRE, that's Random Thoughts with Random Access. You can search for that hashtag, and you can pull everything up on Twitter right away if you don't want to wait for it to appear in your Twitter stream. You can just search for the hashtag, or you can come, like I said, to the Facebook page and see these stories. And I try to part of what I do here is I want to talk about what these stories make me think about. If these stories are interesting to you, then by all means read them. Read the articles I link to. Do further research on the studies. Don't just think, I'm going to listen to what Wayne has to say and I'll learn about the stories. No, what you're going to learn about is what Wayne thinks about the stories, and you might get a sense of how I connect what I see to how I feel, which is important for me. But maybe it gives you an opportunity to think about that in your own life, what you see and what you feel. How does your perception create your reality, and how are you distorting reality? And that's kind of really what I'm doing here, and that's what the kind of random thoughts are. Is something happens and it triggers all kinds of thoughts, emotions, thinking. Things start happening, and there's a lot of perspective involved. So that's kind of what I'm doing here. And so this is Captain America. Well, he's not a big guy. You can tell from this picture, but you see here, he's 5'9", weighs 130 pounds. He's not a Muslim. People think he's a Muslim. He goes about his daily life. He wears a turban. They think he's a Muslim. Okay, Muslims don't wear turbans. They see somebody wearing a turban, they're not a Muslim. They wear something on their head, but it's not a turban. It's a thing on their head. There's a big difference between a turban and a thing on your head. He's a Sikh. Sikh is a relatively popular religion. I mean, I think it's fifth. I guess it would be after Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, and then Sikh. So either way, it's the fifth most popular religion, as the article states. So I didn't remember that, but I know it's very popular. It's not as popular here in the U.S. There are some Sikh communities. In fact, we have a Sikh community that there was a shooting at a couple of years ago. I don't know if you remember hearing this. It was some guy in Michigan or Wisconsin, one of those crazy Midwestern states where they kind of live out in the woods with guns, and then they pro-America, and they decided to go crazy and shoot up some Islamic terrorists, some Muslim terrorists. Well, they were shooting up a Sikh church. Like, we're not Muslims. We're not. But even that is kind of a terrible defense too. I'm trying to be funny, but it's not funny. But to even say that don't shoot me, I'm not Muslim. That's there's a sad statement of that, and I don't know, that's not necessarily what they were saying, but there were people who were kind of talking about that, like, oh, it was a real shame that they made a mistake, confused them with Muslims. And it's like, well, no, the shame is that the guy was shooting people. He had in his head that Muslims are bad. Yeah, he got in his head that Muslims are bad, so he was shooting them. And so this guy here, he's trying to attack these racial stereotypes. So he has this Captain America costume. He doesn't pad it out, and he's not like wearing fake muscles or anything. He's just got this Captain America thing. And then some guys actually made a movie about him. There's like a small movie, and I can't remember what it's called, but you can read the title. But he went out for 3 days around New York City, talked to people. He does this periodically on his own, but for the purposes of this little documentary, he did it for 3 full days. He's a software engineer, I think, in his real most of his time, but I guess he took 3 days of vacation and spent all day in New York City doing this. And just talking with people, interacting with them, and generally, from what I can tell, all positive supports. People, they love the idea that, here's this guy, and he's not Muslim, first of all, but he's born and raised in America, and in the article states he has no accent. He's a completely, American. He's in New York, so maybe he has a New York accent. I didn't actually watch the video, so I don't know what his accent was. But there's nothing about him that says I'm foreign, except for this, a very, you look at him. Okay, he's got sort of the beard and the hat, the turban. He must be foreign, and that triggers thoughts. People see this, and it starts triggering thoughts. Now they start seeing him in this Captain America thing. It's triggering different thoughts, and in this case, it was triggering very favorable thoughts. And I was very happy to read that. But it was, the interesting thing about you see something, and then you have a reaction to it, an emotional reaction. A lot of times it's an emotional, but it also triggers a lot of thoughts. A lot of people are starting to think about terrorism and the evils of the evil terror, and that gets their emotions going. So when he just in his daily life he encounters this, but when he puts on the Captain America outfit, somehow I was actually surprised that it's as positive as it was, because you think you can't disrespect America like that. They actually embraced it. Because this is what America is. America is all of us. America is the whole world when it's at its best. When America's at its best, it's the greatest country in the world. It's been a long time since we've been at our best. I'll throw that out there. All right, Shane, what do you have to say?
Well, I think it's a great article. There are 2 documents that America is really based on, and that's the U.S. Constitution and U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And we definitely don't look at it that way anymore. We used to invite anybody to come into this country, and
that's how we all got here.
Right. So I'm not 100% American. It's like I've got some French in me, I've got some Italian in me, I've got Irish in me. So but either way, my point is that we seem to be going out of our way in order to go away from what it is that the country was born on in the first place. And it seems that the ones that are steadfast in protecting America, so to speak, and I'm not talking about our men and women who are actually protecting our country, in the military the way that they are. I'm talking about ones that are like more radical, more on camera, and in an almost like in an ignorant way, to where they are steadfast for America, when in fact they're really not. I mean, they're actually opposite of what America was born on. And I'm not saying that things haven't changed, and I'm not saying that things don't change, and that there's an adaptive transition. But this is one that's disturbing, and I think that it's great that this article comes out. He definitely has a distinct look, as to where if you look at him and you don't read the article, you don't have a clue, you don't even, and if he was mute, you would think that he was a foreigner. And that now is sort of a negative thing. It's a negative perception of things when we all are. You know what I mean? And our differences are what makes us unique in this world. And so that's what made America so different, was the fact that we had a melting pot of ideas, of culture, of ways of being able to do things, but at the same time coming together as one with those and accepting those. And it just seems as if, like, for whatever reason, we're getting more and more divided from that very point of how this country was made up of.
Maybe it's a good time to talk a little bit again about Bob. It's a good time to talk about perception as reality with the founding of America, like you talked about. America was founded on these wonderful ideals, and we talk about the founding documents a little bit. The founding fathers. When you picture the founding fathers, what kind of person do you picture? Well, except for Benjamin Franklin, who was always an old man, and he loved to hang around young people, because young people, they've always been hip. I mean, the young people are always plugged into what's going on. They're the ones with the fresh ideas. Old people don't have fresh ideas. That's why they're old people. It's young people have fresh ideas. They're the ones who are trying out new things. That's that's just what you do when you're young. The founding fathers were, for almost all of them across the board, were in their 20s, and most of them were between 20 and 25.
Right.
We think of the pictures of all these old people, but at that time,
because of the wigs and all that, they were all kind of,
and they're just portrayed as old, because then by the 1776, when this is going on, a lot of those pictures are kind of what they look like in 1800. Because by the time Washington was elected, and got out of his first term, it's already about 1800. I think it's 1889 when he was elected. He did his 8 years. It's already 1800 before you get the second president. And now they're 25 years past the founding of America. But at 1776, these were all young kids. These people who we revere now as these wise old men, the founding fathers.
They were pretty wise for their age, that's for sure.
And it was, and of course, Ben Franklin recognized that, and young people need, if that message could be told to young people now, to say, hey, in your 20s, you can make a difference. Our country was founded by people in their 20s. They got out and they did it. They didn't wait for somebody else to do it. They didn't, they went out and they did it. So that's a great message. And then you talk about for the first 150, 120, 130, 140 years, until about World War I, the U.S. was we didn't go out picking fights. We didn't go out looking for wars. The U.S. was very non-interventionist. We did not want to get involved in any of Europe's nonsense. Even George Washington wrote a famous speech that it was read at the end of his term about kind of a warning to the rest of America, like, as I leave this office, stay out of Europe's business. Europe is going to be doing whatever they're going to do. You got to let them do whatever they do. Take my word for it. Stay out of it. And then it was a kind of an annual event in the U.S. where that speech was read. Everybody read the speech. The schools would read it. It was a real big deal to remind us to stay out of. And it was Europe was the example, but it really meant the rest of the world. Stay out of the rest of the world's business. Certainly within our hemisphere, maybe, but outside of our hemisphere, Europe, Asia, leave it alone. They're doing whatever they're doing. We're going to have to trade with them. We're going to have to, our economy is going to depend on those people. We don't want to make enemies that way. We're just, and we actually started making a lot of money early in World War I, funding, weapons manufacturing stuff. So it was kind of like the early part of the military-industrial complex. but it wasn't weapons that we were going to use. We were almost not that we were an arms dealer either, but these people they wanted weapons to fight their little wars. We're going to be apolitical here. We're not going to get involved. We'll sell them the weapons, whatever. We were making a lot of money. It took us a long time to get in World War I. Out of Wilson was president at that time. Was he trying to get us in? Was he trying to get us out? I'm not real sure. A little fuzzy on that. But by the time the U.S. eventually did get into World War I, but it was not. We were dragged in, kicking and screaming. World War II, same thing. World War II basically started in 1939. We didn't go in until after Pearl Harbor was bombed.
Right.
And even then, at that same time, Germany declared war on us. So at that point, we just had Pearl Harbor, and then it was like the next day or two, Germany declares war on the U.S. So we really had no choice but to go into the war there. But we weren't, we weren't rushing into that. And it wasn't until after World War II, and then we had Eisenhower as president, and then at the end of Eisenhower's term, much like the end of Washington's term, where he warned us, and we listened. Eisenhower warned us, and we didn't listen. He said, beware of the military-industrial complex. Yeah. Don't build an economy that depends on the war, because if you depend on the war, that's you're going to end up going into wars on purpose. And since then, we have not stopped fighting wars, and so.
Yep.
So that was perception's reality. That was really the kind of the thing. My perception is my reality. I mean, you guys might argue differently about your own perception, but I'll say my perception is my reality, and I've picked some stories that challenge my perception. A reminder about local and sustainable, because I think that's really important. The Twitter update. If you're doing the Twitter account, let's see what we're doing up to here. Twitter update. 956 followers. That number's going down, isn't it?
Like a rock.
Okay, so we're heading to 0 with Twitter followers. So if you're not on Twitter, get on Twitter, follow us, give us a follow. We're trying to get to 1,000.
Somebody's short buying is what's going on.
Yeah, I think so. And check the hashtag. The hashtag is RTWRE. That's Random Thoughts with Random Access. And you can see all the tweets that kind of come out from there. There is some special Twitter exclusive content. Those have the RTWRE tags at the end. Anything with a tag at the beginning is also found over on the Facebook. It's posted on Facebook, and then it's automatically forwarded to Twitter. Amazing technology. And then, of course, you can reach us on the the feedback line, the Random Access feedback line. That's good in the U.S. and Canada. That's let me go ahead and pull that back up, because it's actually on the Twitter profile. It's you can just kind of see it here. It's 15189-666-175. That's good in the U.S. and Canada. 15189-666-175. Feedback lines open from 3 to 4 during the week, 3 to 5 on the weekends, and every night after the show, 11 to midnight. That's our Friday night show, episode 3.5. We'll be back tomorrow with the last episode of the week, 3.6. And special surprise for Sunday, episode 4.0. It's going to be a surprise to me, too. Good night.
Good night, folks.
I don't know if I stopped it. I didn't stop it.